As simple as that. And he was condemned to spend the rest of his life in Shawshank, or the part of it that mattered. 5 years later, he began to have parole hearings, and he was turned down just as regular as clockwork in spite of being a model prisoner. Getting a pass out of Shawshank when you've got murder stamped on your admittance slip is slow work, as slow as a river eroding a rock. 7 men sit on the board, 2 more than at most state prison, and every one of those 7 has an ass as hard as the water drawn up from a mineral spring well. You can't buy those guys. You can't sweet-talk them. You can't cry for them. As far as the board in here is concerned, money don't talk, and nobody walks. There were other reasons in Andy's case as well, but that belongs a little further along in the story.
There was a trustee named Kendricks who was into me for some pretty heavy money back in the 50s, and it was 4 years before he got it all paid off. Most of the interest he paid me was information in my line of work. You're dead if you can't find ways of keeping your ear to the ground. This Kendricks, for instance, had access to records I was never going to see running a stamper down in the goddamn plate shop.
Kendricks told me that the parole board vote was 7-0 against Andy Dufresne through 1957, 6-1 in 58, 7-0 again in 59, and 5-2 in 60. After that, I don't know. But I do know that 16 years later, he was still in cell 14 of cell block 5. By then, 1975, he was 57. They probably would have gotten big-hearted and let him out around 1983. They give you life, and that's what they take, all of it that counts anyway. Wait. I'm confused. Oh well. Maybe they set you loose someday, but... Well, listen. I knew this guy, Sherwood Bolton. His name was, and he had this pigeon in his cell. From 1945 until 1953, when they let him out, he had that pigeon. He wasn't any Birdman of Alcatraz. He just had this pigeon. Jake, he called him. He set Jake free a day before he, Sherwood that is, was to walk, and Jake flew away just as pretty as you could want. But about a week after Sherwood Bolton left our happy little family, a friend of mine called me out over to the west corner of the exercise yard where Sherwood used to hang out. A bird was lying there like a very small pile of dirty bed linen. It looked starved. My friend said, "Isn't that Jake Red?" It was. That pigeon was just as dead as a turd.
I remember the first time Andy Dufresne got in touch with me for something. I remember like it was yesterday. That wasn't the time he wanted Rita Hayworth, though. That came later. In the summer of 1948, he came around for something else.
Most of my deals are done right there in the exercise yard, and that's where this one went down. Our yard is big, much bigger than most. It's a perfect square, 90 yards on the side. The north side is the outer wall with a guard tower at either end. The guards up there are armed with binoculars and riot guns. The main gate is in that north side. The truck loading bays are on the south side of the yard. There are 5 of them. Shawshank is a busy place during the work week deliveries in, deliveries out. We have the license plate factory and a big industrial laundry that does all the prison wet washing, plus that of Kittery Receiving Hospital and the Elliott Nursing Home. There's also a big automotive garage where mechanic inmates fix prison, state, and municipal vehicles, not to mention the private cars of the screws, the administration officers, and, on more than one occasion, those of the parole board.
The east side is a thick stone wall full of tiny slit windows. Cell block 5 is on the other side of that wall. The west side has administration and is infirmary. Shawshank has never been overcrowded at most prisons, and back in 48 it was only filled to something like 2/3 capacity. But at any given time there might be 80 to 120 cons on the yard playing toss with a football or a baseball, shooting
Craps,
jawing at each other, making deals on Sunday, and the place was even more crowded On Sunday, the place would have looked like a country holiday if there had been any woman.
It was on a Sunday that Andy first came to me. I had just finished talking to Elmore Armitage, a fellow who often came in handy to me, about a radio when Andy walked up. I knew who he was, of course. He had a reputation for being a snob and a cold fish. People were saying he was marked for trouble already. One of the people saying so was Boggs Diamond, a bad man to have on your case. Andy had no cellmate, and I'd heard that was just the way he wanted it, although people were already saying he thought his shit smelled sweeter than the ordinary. But I don't have to listen to rumors about a man when I can judge him for myself. "Hello," he said. "I'm Andy Dufresne." He offered his hand, and I shook it. He wasn't a man to waste time being social. He got right to the point. "I understand that you're a man who knows how to get things."
I agree that I was able to locate certain items from time to time. How do you know that? Andy asked. Sometimes, I said, things just seem to come into my hand. I can't explain it, unless it's because I'm Irish. He smiled a little at that. I wondered if you could get me a rock hammer. What would that be, and why would you want it? Andy looked surprised. Do you make motivations a part of your business? With words like those, I could understand how he had gotten a reputation for being a snobby sort of kind of guy who likes to put his airs, but I sensed the tiny thread of humor in his question. I tell you, I said, if you wanted a toothbrush, I wouldn't ask questions. I'd just quote you a price, because a toothbrush, you see, is not a lethal sort of an object. You have strong feelings about lethal objects? I do.
An old friction-taped baseball flew toward us, and we turned cat quick and picked it out of the air. It was a move Frank Malzone would have been proud of. Andy flicked the ball back to where it had come from, just a quick and easy looking flick of the wrist, but that throw had some mustard on it, just the same. I could see a lot of people were watching us with one eye as they went about their business. Probably the guards in the tower were watching too. I won't gild the lily. There are cons that swing weight in any prison, maybe 4 or 5 in a small one, maybe 2 or 3 dozen in a big one. At Shawshank, I was one of those with some weight, and what I thought of Andy Dufresne would have a lot to do with how his time went. He probably knew it too, but he wasn't kowtowing or sucking up to me, and I respected him for that.
Fair enough, I tell you. What is it? And why I want it. A rock hammer looks like a miniature pickaxe, about so long. He held his hands about a foot apart, and that was when I first noticed he neatly kept his nails. How neatly he kept his nails were. He got a small sharp pick on one end and a flat blunt hammerhead on the other. I want it because I like rocks. Rocks, I said. I squat down here a minute, he said.
I humored him. We hunkered down on our haunches like Indians. Andy took a handful of exercise yard dirt and began to sift it between his neat hands so it emerged in a fine cloud. Small pebbles were left over, 1 or 2 sparkly, the rest dull and plain. One of the dull ones was quartz, but it was only dull until you rubbed it clean. Then it had a nice, milky glow. Andy did the cleaning and then tossed it to me. I caught it and named it.
Quartz, sure, he said. And look, mica, shell, silted granite. Here's a place of graded limestone from where they cut this place out of the side of the hill. He tossed them away and dusted his hands. I'm a rock hound, at least I was. A rock hound in my old life. I'd like to be one again on a limited scale.